Okay, so this would be my third and last video about the Dell Alienware Aurora R5. The first video was all about the 1440p gaming performance, the second one was about the internals, upgradability, construction of the case and so on. So now it's time for the full review, and since there is so much to cover, I will try to make it a little bit more loose and have some notes here, otherwise I would not be able to go through with all of this. So let's start with the first thing here, the specs. This is one of the higher end versions. I've seen some higher end ones in the US, but for right now this seems to be one of the higher ones after all. So Intel i7-6900K, the highest Skylake mainstream CPU at the moment. This one is overclocked up to 4.2 GHz, but I've seen even versions up to 4.8 GHz. It is also water cooled, has the GTX 1080, 16 GB of RAM, a 256 GB SSD, and a 1 TB hard drive. As you can see, it weighs almost 15 kilograms. And in terms of size, it's actually quite compact, almost a little bit too heavy for its size. I did not actually expect it. So what do you get with this system? And I have to mention this right beforehand. This is a pre-built system. If you know how to build your own system, I still think you can get away with something better. Not maybe always in terms of value, but usually you should. And also performance, cooling and so on. But as for what it is right now, this one is actually quite good, because I will talk about that a little bit later in the value part, because it actually isn't as overpriced as I thought it would be. So what you get here is a high-end gaming machine, high-end video rendering machine and all that. It is highly capable, of course, since you have the highest end i7, the highest end graphics card at the moment. If you don't consider the Titan X here, this is a highly capable system. So the next thing would be to talk about the gaming. I already made a specific gaming video for 1440p, you can check that as well, but just to sum it up and also cover 4K, if you want to play 1440p, you can pretty much max out every game and still reach very high frame rates, 100 frames and above. If you want to use an ultra wide, you should still get very close to around 100 frames, should be no problem. The system is capable about that performance level. Now 4K is a little bit of a different thing, because 4K is after all very demanding, but if this system can't handle it, no one can, and it got very good values. I would expect if you use the ultra settings to get around 40, sometimes even 60 frames per second, at around that in terms of average. If you lower the settings, you can quite easily reach 60 on average, so that's not a problem, but you will have to lower it. After all, 4K is crazy demanding, and personally for me, I would definitely use it for 1440p and high refresh rates or an ultra wide. I think that's the sweet spot. 4K, I think we are just not there yet for all the games to be playable if you want to enjoy the best graphics. Now the next thing, performance and SSD. The SSD is very fast, it's a Toshiba one, all good here, absolutely top, 256 gigabytes, and the 1 TB hard drive is a 1 TB hard drive. About the upgrades, I made a specific video for that. Everything can be easily upgraded, it's not a problem. Graphics card, no problem. It shouldn't be longer than the Founders Edition though. CPU could be replaced at some point if you want to. Water cooling can also be replaced, but then you have to find something that fits into that as well. But I don't see a need for that, because I will get into that in the cooling part, because the cooling solution here with the water cooled solution is a really good one. Not a lot of PCI Express slots, because there's a big one and a small one, to keep that simple. A lot of USB ports, USB Type-C and all that, so you're fully covered in here. You can only add one or just have one 3.5 inch drive, and that is already in there with the 1 TB drive, and then 2.5, but you can all of that see in my internals video, so I would just say that. Now, I will cover the noise, and I made a specific video for that, so just watch that and I will be back in a second. Let's start with the noise test, and feel free to use my voice as a reference for the volume. I am about 1 meter away from the microphone, which you can see in the upper right corner, which on its own is about 50 centimeters away from the center of the PCU. So now let's check how loud it is on idle. So, as you can definitely hear, it is not inaudible, but this is not due to the fan in the front and also on the top, but mostly due to the PSU, because the fan in the front runs at around 500 RPM and the one on the top with just 150, and both of those are pretty much inaudible, but it is the PSU which is audible at all times, which is a little bit unfortunate. They should have used a semi-passive one, or one that is at least almost silent. This is wasted potential in my opinion, but let's just see how loud the system actually is on full load. So, as you can hopefully hear, the system under full game load didn't really get any louder at all. The only thing that you hear now additionally is the coil whine of the GTX 1080. That's just a thing you can't get rid of, but the system on its own under full load stays relatively quiet, which is really nice to see. If you render a really long video or anything like that, it always stays pretty much what it is right now, which is really quiet. It's not silent, but for its full power and full potential here at the moment, it's really nice and quiet, and I've seen a lot of systems being a lot louder under full load. So the water cooling definitely does a really great job. Like I said already before, it's only the PSU that you mostly hear, and now of course additionally the coil whine of the GTX. The last thing that I want to demonstrate is the system under full maximum noise, but don't panic, you will never experience that kind of noise level, and I have no idea what kind of temperatures you would have to reach for the fans to crank up that extreme. So be cautious if you have maybe headphones on, because it will get loud in a few seconds. I guess it's obvious, with both fans at almost 4400 RPMs, this system is crazy loud, but don't worry, usually the fans never get above 1200 and it is fine, like I showed in the previous part. So all good is here, but if you want some extreme fan speed and noise, you can have that as well. Quick verdict here so far. I am a little bit disappointed when it comes to the noise on idle, since the system with its water cooler and fans could have been near silent. But due to the fact that the PSU is audible at all times, I see some missed opportunities here. Therefore, though, the really good thing is that the system on load almost doesn't get any noticeably more loud, and that is really respectable. On games, you get some additional coil whine, but for some things like, for example, video rendering, you most probably won't even notice the increased noise level, and that is really good. And that also brings me to the next thing, the temperatures, because usually hovering at around 60 degrees Celsius, this is really cool, considering this is overclocked to 4.2 GHz. And since there are also versions out there with up to 4.8 GHz, I think the water cooler on its own is very capable. I don't see any problems here at all, and it manages to keep those temperatures steadily with its quite nice noise level. The next thing to talk about would be the software, and I will leave you here with just a minute of a BIOS video. Let's take a look at the BIOS now. I don't really want to waste too much time on it, since there's just not all that much to see. It's quite a limited BIOS after all. But for example, in the main tab you can see the base specs, like for example CPU, RAM, hard drive configuration and similar. If we switch to the advanced tab, I can't really call it all that advanced, because after all, for example, USB configuration only allows you to enable and disable the front and rear ports. There are a few more power options available, as you can see here. Of course, there are security options, like for example, setting up a password and similar. Boot options are the typical ones that you would expect, but the only really important thing would here be the performance options, because it allows you to overclock your CPU if you have a K version of this PC. There is a OC level 1 that went up to 4.2 GHz on all cores, also level 2, but I would just recommend you to go for customization so you can actually take full advantage of your K CPU, especially if you have the water-cooled version. Here you can set a different core ratio limit override, but that's pretty much it. There aren't all that many options to tweak that, so you maybe won't be able to take full advantage and get the best clocks. After all, I couldn't enable XMP memory, maybe due to the RAM that was used here, but as you can see here, overclocking at least is possible. But that was pretty much already it for the BIOS. Okay. You have seen the BIOS now, so now it's time to take a look at what we get in terms of software, and I will leave you once again here alone for a few seconds. Now, let's take a look at the software and see what we get here, and start off with the pretty much non-existent Alienware audio options. And as you can see here, all you can change in the main tab is the volume. Then there's a tab for a headphone and microphone, but even if connected, there's not really anything important you can change. In the advanced tab, you get an overview of which ports are in use and some more options. Or as you can see, not advanced in my opinion, but at least there's something more here. The Alienware Command Center, starting with the thermal controls. Here you get to see the temperatures of your CPU, environment and GPU. You can see if the CPU pump is running and the GPU fan speed. There's also fan control for the top and also for the front fan. You can change the curve on your own or set a fixed speed, but actually already auto works quite nice. You also get alien effects where you can change the lighting here. You have different presets for colors, or you can just change them on your own. Works definitely quite nice. You can change the lighting for the right, left panel and for the Alienware logo. There's also Alienware Fusion where you can set some more presets for energy management and similar stuff. And then there's Alienware Adrenaline where you can set some presets for games and similar. So as you can see, it's not all that impressive, not all that advanced, but at least you get the bare minimum things you would need. It's okay. I would have not expected to have such a hard time getting the conclusion done, so I will try to pull through now. I think I've covered it all, but in case I forgot something, just leave it down in the comments below. To make sure I won't forget anything important now in the conclusion, let's just go together through the pros and cons. Starting off with the pros, nice gamer design. I can personally attest that, but of course it's personal preference. Powerful water cooler, absolutely, with still enough headroom for some further overclocking. With solid temps at all times, absolutely, and noise at full load, which was almost not any higher compared to the idle noise. That's impressive. Amount of ports, absolutely fine. You have more than enough on the back, and you even have a lot on the top, which is good. Case lighting, in case you're into that. Easy to upgrade, absolutely. All you have to do is just take off this panel, and then pretty much everything else can be done toolless, so this is good. Great performance with pretty much the highest end consumer components. You should be good to go here for quite some time, and of course therefore it is 4K gaming capable and relatively compact for what it is. Now let's get to the cons here. Excessive use of plastic, absolutely, and I can already tell you one thing. During my attempt to put this thing together, I actually broke 2 noses. It was definitely my fault, but if it would have had been not plastic, it would have had not happened. Okay, PSU could be quieter, absolutely, because that's the main gripe for me, because other than that, it just could have been a pretty much silent system. Coil whine on the GPU side, that's not really something you can avoid. Storage expandability is limited. Yeah, it is what it is. The amount of PCIe slots, if you have a smaller system, you just have less PCIe slots. That's what it is. The inbuilt sound card, really disappointing because the maximum volume was just not good enough. And I, on my own system, just have a stock card as well, but a higher end one. And it's definitely a lot better and a lot louder. So here, it wasn't even loud enough. So use an USB solution or just use the remaining slots to upgrade to a proper sound card. Then we have quite heavy for its size, not that it really matters, you won't really carry it around all that much. And then overpriced optional upgrades, because I just saw some few things, like for example, if you want to just upgrade from the 2133 RAM to the 2800 one, with the same capacity you have to pay $70 extra, which is the price of that RAM on its own, so you almost pay pretty much double. Now, what I can't really judge is the value, since I've said it, the prices in the US vary heavily from what I see here. I tried to build this system with the parts I have it in here, and I would land at around 1900 to 2000 euros. But of course, when times change, prices will drop down, and this is a custom solution after all, with the water cooling, with the case, and it's not really comparable. So just keep that in mind. But I have to say, from what I see, it's not as overpriced as I would have expected it to be at first. So it's actually quite good. And I've seen even configurations in the US where you get an extra TV additional to that with a price with solutions up to a 4.8 gigahertz overclocked system, 1080 and all that. And the prices seem actually reasonable. So here I'm actually surprised. So overall, what do I have to say about the system? It's not bad. And if I have to point out one pro and one con, the pro is definitely the performance and the con is definitely the noise on idle. That is something that I had a little bit of a harder time getting used to, since the water cooler is not the issue but the PSU. You could replace that PSU if you want to, but then you would have to reroute all the cables on your own, and if you can already do that, I don't think you would really buy a pre-built system on your own. And that's where I will leave my conclusion. I still think you have a just more flexible PC overall if you build it on your own, and you will save some money, but of course you have to do it on your own, or if you have someone, and it will just take time. Not everyone wants to do it, not everyone can do it. So for those people, this is definitely a legit PC if you can see past the few minor gripes. But you get a lot of value back for your money after all, and I'm definitely not displeased. I can't really judge it all that much since I haven't really reviewed many pre-built ones, but it's nice. It's definitely nice, but I have a hard time judging this objectively since I have built my PCs on my own for more than 2 decades now, and that's where I want to end this video. I hope you liked it. It was helpful. If there's anything, as I said, I forgot, just leave that down in the comments. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more, and I wish you a nice day. Until next time, bye.